Well, we're going to become increasingly non-biological to the point where the non-biological part predominates and the biological part is not that important anymore.
When it starts to collapse, it's going to happen very fast.
Defeat the globalists who want to shatter your mind!
In the future, the internet will be in your contact lens. You will blink and you will go online.
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
There's going to be a revolution. It's totally going to happen.
A new world order.
History is leading toward the transformation of this planet in our lifetime.
Hello, you're listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review podcast. I'm Aaron Franz of theageoftransitions.com, and here with me is my co-host, Adam of cerebralrevolt.com. So how are you doing today, Adam?
I am well, Aaron. I'm well, and I'm looking forward to our next installment of Themes. Well, our first installment of Themes and Memes, in fact.
Yeah.
We've started, obviously, doing a few of these movie reviews, but this is now its own thing.
That's right. This is the first official Themes and Memes episode is what this podcast is. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and as the audience will have noticed, we have new graphics and we have new music, and we've got a whole new project that's independent of either of our websites going on here. So this is not Aaron interviewing me or me interviewing Aaron. This is a conversation an ongoing conversation we'll be having on a monthly basis from this point onwards. Mostly about films, I think, yeah. But we'll probably stray into other areas as well, such as popular culture and music and other things as well.
Yeah, there's plenty of popular culture to review. So for now, we're reviewing movies, but yeah, we're definitely leaving room to expand. But as we were saying last time, there's so many films, like it's gonna be hard for us to keep up with the volume of films. Definitely,
it's crazy. It's crazy at the moment. I mean, it's like I said in the previous interview. I think I can't remember whether it was you or somebody else, but I mentioned the fact that it was the sheer output of Hollywood right now is quite staggering, and has been for the past 18 months, 2 years. I mean, the content is something else altogether, but just the output, the amount of big blockbuster films that are coming out on such a regular basis now, and which contain so many of these culturally extremely significant cultural themes and memes and ideas. Yeah. The output is quite amazing, and so we've got a fair list of films to get through before we can even start thinking about other stuff. I mean, but as I said, I'm sure we'll move on to other things, later on down the line. But for now, with so many movies to talk about, so much going on in the world of film.
With our title, Themes and Memes, the thing about a meme is that it's something that's repeated. So it's something that's repeated and becomes familiar to people. So it's an idea that becomes familiarized to people. So repetition is part of its nature, really. So that kind of lends itself to, if we're going to be talking about memes, we ourselves are going to be repeating ourselves a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. And that's something that, I mean, people should probably just bear in mind. If it sounds like we are just repeating ourselves each time we discuss a film or some kind of other aspect of pop culture or whatever it may be, it may sound like we're repeating ourselves for no reason and just saying, oh, it all comes back down to this and it all comes back down to that, and it's the same old themes over and over again. But we're doing that for a reason, There's method to that. It's about significance of memes, and the very fact, the very nature of a meme is that, as you described before, it's something that repeats itself and regenerates itself and grows and grows and grows. And so, in analyzing that, that process, we will in ourselves be repeating ourselves.
Yeah. So, We're just warning the audience right now. Get ready.
Yeah.
Bear with us here. But I do want to say that we are going to be hitting a lot of unique points. I'm sure that in every one of our reviews, we'll bring up points that you haven't heard anywhere else before, at least once in every review. That's bound to happen, because there's just unique things that I find popping up in every film.
I think, and that's part of our aim as well. I think both of what we both like to do, to at least to a degree, is as much as we can, is point out things that haven't been pointed out before. Is to make a point of saying, hey, has anybody considered things from this angle, or has anybody noticed this, or has anybody thought about things this way, or exactly. I think that's one of my has always been one of my goals in this sort of area, and I think for you as well.
There's the funniest story here. I had a teacher in college actually who he would it was this 3-dimensional design class where he would take this shape, and his whole thing was, well, maybe it goes like this, and you tilt it on the side, like, well, maybe you tilt it around this way, it goes like this, and like we kind of made fun of him, and the impression of him would be like, maybe it goes like this, maybe it goes like that. But that's exactly what we end up doing, and I find myself like doing the same thing as that now, so it's just kind of funny. I don't know.
Yeah, it's good. It's kind of funny. Yeah, the whole thing is got a comedic side to it. And I was almost tempted to make a sort of comedic style music to go along with it, but I decided to go for something a bit more mysterious, with a bit more intrigue and mystique evoked by the music rather than comedy. Because that's the kind of, we want people to be thinking seriously, because we're doing this for a reason, because these are serious themes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have great cultural significance, and that's why we're discussing them. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado here, why don't we get into the movie review for today? What movie are we going to review today?
We will be reviewing the film Elysium. Now, I'm not sure how many how many people in the audience have already seen this film. It's been out in theaters for a while. I'm not sure if it's still in theaters, but it came out in theaters a few months ago, and it's just come out on as a digital download on iTunes and in some countries. So there are a few copies floating around, and we both managed to get a hold of one. And it's a very, very, very interesting film. There's a lot going on in that film. There's a lot of angles we could take on it, and I think which we will take on it in terms of analysing it, and all of its content. But it makes, to me, that film makes some pretty serious statements about the future of humanity. Absolutely. And I think that's the discussion we'll be having for the next hour or so, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so let's start out by talking about a lot of the things that we are going to end up repeating ourselves, surely, because you've got the transhuman themes, the merge of man with technology, predictive programming elements for what we should expect in the future in terms of like sort of revolutionary turmoil, things like this.
Yep.
So again, as we were saying at the beginning, sort of repetitive themes, but the reason that these specific themes repeat so often in movies is that they're not only talking about our current point in time, they're talking about the near future too. They're doing it from a predictive programming element where they want you to realize, they want you to have a certain perception of the world. Like, this is the way the world is. This is what you should expect to happen from where we are now. So that's what that's what's going on here.
Well, that's what predictive programming is at its core. It's to usually subliminally, well, maybe not subliminally, but through repetition and through people's lack of general critical awareness. The idea is to basically implant an expectation in somebody's mind at the deepest level possible, so that that person in future, once they encounter something that bears resemblance to that theme that's been implanted with their mind, will automatically come to accept it as being a possibility, as being natural, as being something they shouldn't question, as being something they shouldn't really have to worry about too much. They've been acclimatized to it. They've been psychologically familiarized with the concept. And so they feel more comfortable with it. They feel as if it was to be expected. And it feels almost like a natural progression to them. And so that is what predictive programming is at its core, and that is what a lot of what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah. Well, right from the beginning of the film, I noticed a few concepts in this vein of predictive programming that were hit immediately. You've got the idea of overpopulation and of rampant pollution right from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think from memory, it was it Los Angeles?
It's Los Angeles. You know what's funny is it's a version of Los Angeles that's not too far removed from the current version of LA, because I live here in LA County, so I appreciate a lot of the aspects of the setting of the film, and I have a lot of interesting little insights about LA specifically here in this film. Yeah.
No, I'd like to. I'd be interested to hear what those are, because I figured you might have something to say about that, given the film was set in LA. It's kind of got a Mexico City look to it, you know.
Yes.
And that's another one of the things that I noticed about it is it's almost and sort of it has some very, how shall I say it, allegorical themes, which relate to subjects like immigration, Mexicans immigrating to America, and things like that. So that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot going on with language, with like Spanish and English, and even beyond that. That I think let's save that till later. But I want people to know that there's some serious stuff going on with language, and also with the fact that it's set in LA. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, let's just talk about the fact that they did make a point to throw in like the massive pollution element.
Yeah.
And to me, that's definitely a predictive programming point that you see throughout all media, not just movies. You see everybody saying, oh, there's too much pollution. Oh, what are we going to do? You know, the climate change thing. To me, it almost feels as if it's a directive given to producers and directors by, I don't know, by somebody. I don't know who it would be, like just their associates, even if they have a shared agreement where, hey, look, every time you mention this as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I think it works in different ways in every particular context is maybe slightly different, but I think it's almost like it feels to me as if the general idea is this is like a part of your unwritten contract when you're going to make a film, is that you have to put like the most, how should we put that? The establishment, the upper class, the ruling elite, shall we say? The most important sort of concepts and ideas that they want to put across, always put across in these big blockbuster films somehow. And it almost seems to be, especially relating to the whole environmental thing, pollution, and saving the planet, and all the different ideas, and too much carbon dioxide and not enough power, and all this kind of stuff. It almost seems to be like an unwritten part of the agreement. If you're going to make a film with a big budget production company, and it's going to be a big Hollywood production, and you're going to get distribution, and you're going to have A-list actors, and all that kind of stuff, it's like you have to put that stuff in there.
Yeah.
You don't have. It's almost like you don't have a choice. It's almost like the unwritten law in Hollywood or something that you've got to make a mention of climate change or of the world, of overpopulation, or humans living unsustainably, and of all this kind of stuff. And a very similar thing happens with the transhuman movement as well. And I think there's a similar relationship there as well, where it's almost like an unwritten. It's kind of like
we don't know what the method is going on there, but certainly these are memes put in there deliberately. And all across media, it's being repeated for a reason. Certainly, it's not just because it's a good theme to hit. It works good with the story or whatever. No, they're putting it in there to get people really familiarized with the meme, and to such an extent where that becomes your reality again, because perception is reality. So people are perceiving, they're perceiving pollution, the problem of pollution, to be within this context that we're given in fiction. Not to say that pollution isn't a problem, but it's the fictional representation that we've been given over and over and over again that becomes reality. So fiction becomes reality again. Predictive programming at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, should we give a brief outline of what sort of the film was really about, just in case?
Yeah, I think
people
so.
Who maybe haven't seen it, or maybe they went to see it in the theater and they just got so blown away by all of the CGI that they can't remember what happened.
Yeah,
because that does happen.
I think we need to. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, what we've got is it's another movie that's set in the future. It's I believe it starts out in 2154.
Yeah,
so
2154. Yep.
Just around about 150 years in the future, thereabouts, and it basically starts out with this sort of just pictures of a crumbling, destitute society where you've just got just crime and rioting and poverty and people living in absolute destitution everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it says, by 2154, the world's population had grown completely out of control, and disease was rampant, and governments had collapsed. And those who had the money, basically, those who the society's elite, basically, decided to build themselves a habitat away from Earth in the form of a space station, which is basically a pentagram or a pentagon in the sky. Mm-hmm. It's a wheel that spins very slowly, giving you a gravimetric effect.
Just a point on the wheel. You know what it looked like to me? It looked like a steering wheel from a car.
It kind of does look like that a bit, depending on what kind of car you have, obviously. But
like kind of an old-fashioned kind of car, like a wheel, even like a rim to a wheel, but a steering wheel, and that would make sense that like the elite living on Elysium would steer the lives of everybody living down on Earth. So,
well, that I had not considered that point of view. That's very interesting. Yeah.
I think they're playing on that. Yeah,
that's interesting.
And again, with the steering wheel, you put your two hands on the steering wheel. Your hands, again, we were getting into the meaning of the pent before in the previous interview. Well, the pent is the five fingers on your hand, and you need your hands to control the wheel. So the five, the pentagram, the controlling with the hand, because the hand is what you use to manipulate the physical world. So I think they're playing on all of that there.
No, I think you could be right. I mean, as I said, I hadn't looked at it from that particular perspective, but I think you could be right there. But so anyway, these the elite, the very very comparatively small percentage of the population have created this enormous space station, which is actually based on one of Wernher von Braun's designs, the guy who worked on the Apollo program. This was his idea, and which also was presented in the film 2001: The Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. So it's kind of like a throwback to that old science fiction era, in which I think we're seeing more and more of today, sort of a mix of the old science fiction films from the 70s, or at least science fiction and scientific and space-bound type themes from the 60s and 70s sort of being reintegrated back into modern sci-fi. But anyway, so this huge, enormous space station is so big that you've literally got whole parks and towns and cities and everything like that. An entire city just sort of living inside the rim of this spinning wheel, and it's spinning just slowly enough to create. I think it's Wernher von Braun's design was just like 7/10 of a G, so it wouldn't be like full gravity on Earth. It would be like 70% of the gravity you have on Earth. So it would be easier to live on, and your muscles would probably become weak. But again, we come back to the fact of transhumanism, because the citizens of Elysium, as opposed to the subsistence dwellers down on Earth, have access to incredibly advanced technology, which literally reatomizes their bodies, and can heal them, and they literally never die. They lie in this kind of this bed type, the hospital bed type thing, and this glass cover comes over it, and it literally will reconstruct atoms at an atomic level So any illness, any ailment, any decay of cells or anything like that, any injury, any type of disease or problem with the body, this machine will fix like instantly. Within about 10 seconds, it's gone. And it shows you. There's even a scene in the film where one of the bad guys, which we'll count later, one of the bad guys, literally gets half his face blown off by a grenade. And he just dumps into one of these machines, and within 15 seconds, he's got a brand new face again.
Yeah.
It looked no scars, no nothing. It's brand new, and it's so you've got that whole idea of
the life extension,
life extension, and of also of being physically enhanced somehow. That isn't so much. Talked about in the film as such. Sorry,
they play with the idea, but the main transhuman idea is that of life extension, and how the appearance of life extension necessarily brings with it the problem of a huge social rift, where you can get the elite who have access to technology, and then everybody else who doesn't. And really, the whole point of the movie is, well, what do we do about that problem? How do we solve that problem? The problem of inequity in terms of life extension and genetic therapies, all sorts of advanced medical transhuman technologies.
Yeah. Well, I do know that there are some companies out there who are trying to make this type of technology more affordable, because I have a friend of mine who actually works for a biotech company.
Oh, wow.
And has told me he's actually got devices at home he's brought home from work where... he's showing me you can actually get a device now, the shape of it like the size of a cell phone, that will analyze and sequence and do all kinds of things to your DNA. Can actually, what I mean. There are some smaller companies out there who are trying to do that kind of thing, but I don't think the grand plan here is to make that technology available to everyone. I don't think companies that try and do that will. We'll get very far with it, so.
Google just recently kind of announced that they have a life extension program going, and that's recent news. I had not known of that at all until recently. I didn't know that either. They have a lot of partner companies like 23andMe, and these things are just all right across the street from each other, and up in Palo Alto, there, Silicon Valley. So.
The whole Silicon Valley area,
Yeah, to me, all those installations, like you got the NASA installation, what is it called? The ARC, Ames Research Center is right there. Then you got Google right there. You got Stanford right there. They all work with each other. They all, work on the same project. So to me, it's just one big project, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. And some people would argue with that and say, oh, no, it's all separate things, and it's all separate ideas and separate people doing their own thing, and there's all these different factions who've got different ideas about the world and who want to go in different directions, and there'll be a degree of that, there'll be a degree of that, but I think on the whole, I think you're right. I think in terms of the transhuman movement, the transhuman project, and getting these ideas out into the public sphere and getting people to accept them, as being an inevitable, thing that's going to come about in the future, basically.
Well,
I think it is one project, and I think that it's coordinated across multiple, public sectors and private sectors and public-private partnerships and all sorts of different, organizations, NGOs, you name it. I mean, I think you've got a lot of coordination, like you said before, all these different companies, in different areas, like the military, the sort of NASA, you've got Google, all these different parts of
it's all the same. It's all the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because Google came out and admitted they work with the NSA. That was like 2010, I think, that they admitted that. They didn't say the degree to which that is true, but
they just said that we help each other out. Basically, was the kind of the bottom line there. Yeah.
And it's funny. The movie kind of plays on this. Political conspiracy idea that involves industry, because you've got the Jodie Foster character being the corrupt Secretary of State who works together with this guy whose company creates the robots, who are basically like the robot police force that enslaves the entire population.
Well, not just the robots though. He created the entire program that runs Elysium itself,
That's
that's
right,
very interesting idea. Is because I mean, if you look at some of the kind of books by Jacques Fresco and some of the pictures that he's put in there about his whole Venus Project idea, it's very similar. They've got, it's like a circle. It's like a circular structure with a sort of a habitat, structure which is basically run by computer.
Yeah.
Everything's run by computer. Everything's run by computer systems.
Yep.
Every single thing that you do is run by some kind of massive computer somewhere. And so this guy that you're referring to, the guy who runs, I can't remember, it's
Amgen or something like that.
Amgen, something like that. Something Industries. Not only do they manufacture the robot police, but they also manufacture the software that runs Elysium itself.
Yeah.
And so you've got the whole idea of the sort of the so-called resource-based economy there as well. Sort of kind of slipped in there, and that's presented to the audience much more towards the end of the film. But we can get to that later on. But so to get back to like the what the film's about, it's basically you've got just these most of the population living on Earth, living in disease and poverty and ruin, and then sort of a much smaller percentage of the population living in absolute luxury up on the space station. And so it's a classic case of the hero going and tipping the balance, of a revolution of sorts.
Yes, definitely the hero character, absolutely. And they're playing to the concept of revolution, certainly here, in that it's a revolutionary time where there's total slavery of the massive population. There's just no bones about it. It's utter, complete slavery. So when you're put into that situation, what does one do? You have the main character, Matt Damon. He was a criminal, because there was no opportunity for him. That's the way things work. People turn to criminal activity when there's no way out. I mean, that's just what happens.
That's what happens. That's a fact of life.
So the big question is, what do the slaves do to free themselves? It's the Spartacus idea. We've seen this so many times over, but this is put into like a futuristic, near future context here. Exactly. Well, another thing to mention as well is the fact that they mention this kind of situation as being 2154, whereas if you actually read some of the white papers put out by organizations like DCDC, I can't remember what the Ministry of Defense. It's basically the Ministry of Defense of the UK.
And they also did them for NATO, and the American National Intelligence Council has done a very, very similar number of papers as well that basically said the same thing. They're talking, the film says, this is kind of what the world's going to be like in 2154, but all these military documents say, actually, no, more like 2054, So, and they keep on mentioning that date comes up over again and again, 2030 and 2050. So, I think... The StratTrans report specifically states that there will be an elite that owns everything, and then everybody else living in utter poverty, which is exactly what's going on in this film. So they mention exactly this, and they project that will be the future. Well, that's exactly what they're saying. What it actually says, in the report, it says globalization will result in critical independencies that will link members of a globalized society that includes a small, super rich elite and a substantial underclass of slum and subsistence dwellers who will make up 20% of the world population in 2020. So there's still 20% is not as big as is being suggested in Elysium, but this is only 2020 they're talking about here. I'm sure that number will grow quite considerably by 2050, or 2154 is suggested in the film. And they give their reasons for this to do with the possible collapse of certain energy markets and collapse of economic resources and foodstuffs and fish stocks and food supplies and all the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. They go on. But, yeah, they do actually say that. They're very, very clear to point out the fact in this report that they do expect this to happen. And that's not a maybe. They've got different
that's right. They say definitely. Yeah, different levels of certainty.
There's different levels of certainty in the report, and and that's in the sort of the preface. They basically say, like, when we use this word, it's got a 50% chance of happening.
Yep.
When we use that word, it's got a 75% chance of happening. And when we use this word, it's got a 100% chance of happening.
Yeah.
And in this particular context that we're talking about here, with this super rich elite living in some kind of Tower of Babel, so to speak, where they're just completely separated from the rest of the population and live in absolute luxury and indulgence, and the rest of the world living in complete subsistence. I mean, they say that will happen.
Yeah.
So
what we get in this film is the reality that we've been given in a military government report. So this is the official reality that the military of the UK said will come by 2020. And this is a movie showing you the exact same thing. So we obviously have the predictive programming conundrum, I guess, as it were, going on here, in that we're seeing something that has been said by official sources that will come true in the future.
Yeah.
So, we're given the problem of our day. And even though it's not quite there yet, we're working our way to it. So the issue is, okay, this is the problem. It's going to happen. We told you so. Now, how do we work out a solution to it? And that's really what the movie is all about. What are the solutions to this? And of course, it's a revolutionary situation where the proletariat, the masses, have to find some sort of revolutionary way to gain equality, to make sure that there's some equity going on here.
Yeah.
There's not so much disparity between everybody. And really, that's what the whole film is about. That's the main theme really going there.
Yeah, and it shows you at the beginning of the film how the current, basically the only current effort to tip the scales in some way, or to at least bring about more equality in terms of healthcare and access to resources and things like that, is these Mexican gangs that do these kind of like it's kind of like, as I said, against like the sort of border jumpers that jump the what's that river again? The Grand.
The Rio Grande. Yeah, they're definitely playing into immigration big time.
Yeah, definitely. It's like the proverb. It's like space or the atmosphere being the Rio Grande, and it's just got these sort of Mexicans trying to jump the border.
Yes.
And run by sort of a gangster who's got who's connected into all these different computer systems and runs these spaceship things and but of course, it just basically shows how that's failing. They're being shot down basically. And you've got this very sort of stern Hillary Clinton type woman played by Jodie Foster.
Yes, Hillary Clinton. Yep, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Sort of secretary or Janet Napolitano, whoever you want to,
Condoleezza Rice.
Condoleezza Rice, whoever. Yeah, exactly. the masculine woman.
Yes.
Very, very tough. Very, very no nonsense. And she keeps referring to the concept of homeland security and how she's in charge of homeland security.
Yes.
And in doing so, she needs to shoot down these ships and destroy them before they get anywhere near Elysium, and contaminate Elysium with their, with their diseases, and steal the resources. And
you know what I found very interesting on this point? It's the way that she frames how she's protecting Elysium is a feminine way that she sort of frames it. She asks the president, "Do you have any children?" And he doesn't give an answer, and he's like, "Oh, I assume you don't."
Well,
so that's what the female does. She protects the children. I mean, this is well known. You've got the mother bear being renowned for being incredibly dangerous around cubs. If you're around her cubs, she'll destroy you. Yeah. So this is the same idea. It's showing you. I mean, generically speaking, one would think, okay, we got a female in charge of the military. That means it's going to be a kinder, gentler military. Well, not necessarily.
No.
Because the female can be extremely violent, and the reason being, and the framework within which that would happen is them being protective. and they're protecting the because that's the female role really. So they're definitely playing to that like innate human trait there, and I thought that was pretty good.
I mean, there's that side of it too, and there's also the fact that there are just psychopathic females out there as well, though.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, there's crazy women out there who are more masculine than feminine, and who really are quite. Who are just pure warmongers as well,
Yeah. Well, the main point is that you get a female Secretary of State, you're not really solving anything. You still got the same system in place there. Yeah.
And there's also the fact that she could also be seen as a goddess because there's some esoteric ideas going on there. But perhaps that's something we'll get into later on because that is a whole kind of another side to the story. It's another level of depth and kind of it's almost a different conversation. So we'll either leave that to the end of this one or maybe we'll do another one on it. So
yeah, absolutely.
But so basically they're sort of showing how the current efforts to bring people across the proverbial border into Elysium so they can get treated and, be cured of their diseases and all the rest of it is, it failed miserably. They're constantly being shot down and all this kind of stuff. And so the idea that's being presented in the film as the solution to that problem, as you were mentioning before, is once again, you've got to become part of the system to fight the system. And so what happens in the film? Matt Damon, well, he has an accident at work. He just happens to work for the very company that's making these robots and that runs the whole computer system that runs Elysium. He has an accident at work and gets a lethal dose of radiation and is told that he has 5 days to live. And so he goes to see his old boss, this gangster, this Mexican sort of gangster guy who's running these sort of refugees, across the atmospheric border up into Elysium. And he says, right, well, if you want to be cured, I can do it, but on one condition, you have to steal some data from me, for me, and by basically inserting a brain chip into the back of your head, and then going and doing a sort of a carjacking or a spaceship jacking, hijack basically, and take down one of these billionaires in their spacecraft, plug your brain chip into his brain chip, download all his data, so all his personal, sort of, critical, crucial data, which could be used against him, which could be used to access resources or reprogram things or whatever, but the only way you're going to be able to do that, because you're dying of radiation, is if we fit you with one of these exoskeletons, which were also mentioned in a government white paper, the NBIC report, which we keep referring back to in all of our conversations, because they talk about the fact that we've seen, there's plenty of videos all over YouTube of DARPA working on this type of technology, and it looks fairly cumbersome in the videos that they put out there, but I have a tendency to believe that the actual stuff that they put out in the public domain is fairly old, and it's fairly obsolete compared to what they've actually got. I mean, I don't think.
Well, the thing is that the videos of what they've shown on TV and whatnot looks a lot like what Matt Damon has in this film.
It looks
it's the same thing.
Yeah. It's the same thing, just a lot more cumbersome. The ones that and sort of it's still in the experimental, developmental stages. Supposedly, I mean that's what DARPA say, and that's what they sort of present it as being in their little sort of YouTube clips and promotional videos.
The DARPA YouTube channel has videos of all this stuff, basically. Yeah, that's a pretty good YouTube channel, actually.
Yeah. So I mean, people can go and watch that, but I mean, I personally tend to believe that why would the military's top research and development department give away their secrets? Why would they show you how far ahead they are? It's going to tell you that they're weaker or they're less capable than they really are, because that's the whole point of warfare and of military strategy is you don't know at the end. You know exactly what weapons you've got, and how far along you are with them. You mislead them into thinking that you're not very strong or you're not very powerful, and in this context the enemy is the public in many ways. So they're not exactly going to tell the public exactly how far along they are, because that would be basically giving away their secrets.
Exactly. Well, you've got the national security excuse too, and that's
of course. National security, always.
That works for intelligence as it does military as well, and the two feed into each other, of course.
That's the point I was going to make. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
right. National security. It's always about that. But yeah, the solution to the masses' enslavement is for one of those slaves, I'll mention just one of them, to become the hero character by becoming merged with machinery so that he becomes stronger and able to fight the machines on the other end. So you have to, again, fight fire with fire, like I was saying last time. It's that. You see this in every movie. You're given this like huge technological problem like an AI or whatever. In this case, Elysium, it'd be a ruling elite that has access to these life extension technologies, and they also have an army of machines, droids that are suppressing and just totally enslaving the people. They're using them for that purpose. How do you fight that? Well, you become it. That's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and it shows you that in the film. When you first get this exoskeleton installed or fitted, rather, this guy, the Matt Damon character, who's who would otherwise be sort of weak and sort of lying on the ground dying of radiation, is literally ripping robots to pieces. Because he's got the power of the exoskeleton. So that is being very sort of highly promoted there as once again to beat the system and to tip the balance and to incite some kind of revolutionary process. You must become part of the system, and you must get the brain chip installed in your head, and you must get the exoskeleton installed in your body, and you must go along with that system and be part of it. So, yeah.
It's funny that they use the hero character to show that that's what the hero does. He does these things as there's a lot of things going on with the hero archetype that I want to talk about later going on there, because there's just tons of things.
The sacrifice of all, tons of stuff,
But another thing that I found interesting with the characters was that, what was it, Kruger, I think, was this, basically he's this low-life scum character that Jodie Foster hires to be part of to work for some government agency that suppresses the people again on Earth.
He's like a Black Ops. He's a typical, like, off the books Black Ops agent. He's her number one guy who's officially. I think there was some argument between her and the rest of the bureaucracy in Elysium. Regarding whether they should be using these programs, and we thought these programs were supposed to be shut down, and it's kind of like the Bourne Identity again. We've got this whole idea of the super soldier program, and whether the government actually knows it's running, and how far, how serious is it, and how many layers are there to it, and we want it shut down, but we need to use it, and there's that whole sort of conversation and argument going on there. But he's basically her top hitman, and. It's funny because the movie was directed by Neill Blomkamp, who also directed District 9, which was set in South Africa, and this guy Kruger happens to be a South African as well. So there's obviously a bit of interest there.
You know what? The actor is the same actor from District 9. The role that he plays, the role that he plays in District 9, I feel it parallels the role he's playing here. It's almost the same. It's like different aspects of the same idea, these two characters.
That's right, yeah. I mean, it's almost, the role he plays in District 9 is kind of this very sort of nerdy, kind of, how shall I put it, sort of...
He's a bureaucrat,
right? He's a bureaucrat, yeah. He goes around, charging and taxing and making sure things are up to spec, and basically being an annoying bureaucrat.
So he plays a little tool of the system.
Like a little minion, who's sent out to do the dirty work and fill in the papers and charge people and tax people and make sure this is an order and that's an order and all the rest of it, and then sort of enforce certain policies. And on a sort of, with his military backup behind him, and in this film he's actually the tough guy, So
he's playing the same character but a different, more strong aspect of that. But it's basically the same thing, and they're pointing out the characters that the system exploits in order to further its own goals, and they exploit these characters. Certainly, the Vicus character in District 9 gets a little more exploited than this character here, but he too is also being exploited by Jodie Foster and used in order to just bring back Matt Damon and all the information, and it's a way to show, you know, the corruption of the system and things like that. So they're definitely pointing that out in these characters for sure.
Yeah, and the reason she's using him is to basically try and track down the Matt Damon character who's had this. Obviously, you know, he's been given a lethal dose of radiation, and he's gone and got this exoskeleton to keep him alive on the proviso that he does a certain job, and so he chooses the target, being his former employer, the guy who was basically responsible for him, you know, being irradiated.
That's right.
And so they shoot down his ship, and they plug each other's brains into one another, and they download all his data because, you know, everyone's got a brain chip. You know, all the elites have a brain chip, you know, in this particular setting. And so he downloads all the data from him, and then once he downloads it, he takes it back to his sort of gangster boss, and his boss realizes that what's actually going on is that this guy, this sort of elite corporatist who runs the CEO of the industry that you know, runs the Elysium computer program and runs the whole droid program, his ex-employer, has actually written a reboot sequence for the whole Elysium database, so that the Jodie Foster character, who he's in cahoots with, the Secretary of State, so that she can actually basically have a coup. She can reset the Elysium systems and make herself president, and basically take any authority away from, you know, the rest of the bureaucracy in Elysium, because she sees herself as being, you know, absolutely superior. It's funny because in the film she gets killed by Kruger in the end, you know. Yes. Once you realize that he's being used basically, and he's angry because he's just had his his face blown up, and he's been, even though he's okay now, he's angry, and he kills her and stabs her, and without going into the sort of the whole story, she has the opportunity to get medical treatment, basic medical treatment, by a nurse who happens to be one of Matt Damon's friends, and I won't go into the whole, how that happens, and because it's too complicated for an hour interview. But basically, she gets stabbed in the throat, and she's dying, and she's lying there on the floor, and she refuses medical treatment. Either A, because she doesn't want to be touched by one of the lower subsistence dwellers from Earth, or B, because she believes so strongly in her own religion. But basically what it is, and we'll get to that, later on, the sort of religious, esoteric, mythological concepts within this film. She believes so strongly in it that she's willing to die for it.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting theme there.
That is.
The whole sacrifice of the goddess.
Yeah.
And we could go in a million different directions on that subject.
Yeah. But, I'm thinking we're gonna have to do. What we'll do is we'll make this 2 separate shows. So this month we're going to be talking about the Elysium. Next month we're going to be talking about Elysium in a more occult, esoteric sense, because there's tons of stuff that I noticed. Yeah. So that'll be next month.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but for the meantime, where were we?
Well, for now, I'd kind of like to just mention a couple little points that I noticed in the movie that popped out to me. Things like I noticed that vaccinations they made a point to show a lot of that. Did you notice that?
Yeah, vaccinations were kind of a big thing, and also the idea of science being the cure for everything.
Yes.
The whole transhuman ideology, and and at the end of the film, it's obviously no surprise that the revolution does happen. The Elysium systems are rebooted, and therefore the whole of the human population registered on the central databases as being citizens of Elysium. Therefore, automatically the computer sends out spaceships and drones to go and give people vaccinations and give them healthcare and give them everything they need.
The robots that were used to oppress are now used to heal. Yep.
Exactly. So basically, just through a bit of computer programming, they've literally changed the world. They've completely changed the course of history through a bit of computer programming. You know,
yeah, it's definitely a dialectic idea in that, yes, technology is neither good nor bad, but it takes an either completely bad or completely good form at any given time. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's right. You know, it's and that's the same idea that comes up in so many other films. You know, yeah, it's either used to oppress or used to to liberate.
Yeah, it's one or the other. It's not really anything in between because there's no such thing as in betweens. Yeah, that always occurs. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the hour here. So I think what would be best is if both of us just point out things that we noticed in this movie so that people might be able to go back and see for themselves. Just make some quick points here. Did you notice anything in the movie that you want to point out here, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots and lots of little things, but I mean, I guess just to rattle off a few points. I mean, again, one thing I mentioned earlier on is sort of the throwback to the 70s sci-fi era and some of the ideas that are coming back and being incorporated into modern sci-fi, and in a lot of the in a lot of the scenes in Elysium, you have basically a robot offering a pill for everything, you know, and of the whole idea of a drug population, where the pill doesn't actually do anything to really cure you. It's just to basically, to keep you pacified and out of pain and just sort of manage the symptoms rather than actually cure you. So the whole massive expansion of, a sort of, pharmaceutical slavery and all of those ideas. You've got the guy, the protagonist, Matt Damon, who works for the robot factory that makes the robots that enslave him, which is just like the film. That film George Lucas did, THX.
Oh, 1138, yeah.
1138, yeah. So you've got the same thing there, where the protagonist is working for the robot factory. He's making the robots that enslave him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And in that film, you've also got the same idea of basically a sort of a computerized system, just dishing out pills for for every single problem that might come up in life. To sort of pacify people and just manage their symptoms rather than actually curing them. Mm-hmm. So you've got that whole sort of idea as well. Also, I mean, I think throughout the whole film, and especially some of the scenes where you've got these droids beating up people, it's just there's a real feeling of degradation, of degradation of human life and the value of human life. The whole of humanity is living under a robotic police state and being just shoved around and beat up. I mean, Matt Damon gets his arm broken by a droid just for making a tiny little joke. Of being treated
dehumanized by machines,
completely dehumanized by machines. Being treated like an animal, being herded around like cattle. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that comes up, constantly throughout the film.
Yeah,
constantly throughout the film. So yeah.
Well, on the robot line, I noticed UAV drone, sort of surveillance drones. They were obviously in the film.
Yeah.
The police were using
lots of drones.
Yep.
Lots and lots of drones. Yeah.
So that parallels the news story of our day. Obviously, throwing that in
course.
there. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you should say that because Neill Blomkamp, the director, he was interviewed on film, and he made a comment basically talking about how people are always asking him about his predictions of the future. People saying, what kind of predictions are you making here? What kind of comments are you making about the future? And he basically keeps saying to people, look, I'm not talking about the future. I'm talking about right now.
Yeah.
This film is about right now. This film is about today. Do you not see that? That's what he actually says that in interviews.
Yes.
So that ties into what we were sort of talking about before about how this whole scenario is portrayed as being in 150 years' time, whereas the military, basically see it happening very, very, very soon, mm-hmm. A lot closer than that. And the director himself is basically saying, well, actually, it's already here. Maybe not in the exact same form, but we're at that stage already. At least on one level, on the way we think socially and philosophically, and the split between humanity, between an ultra rich elite and a huge population of subsistence dwellers. So it's funny that he should say that. And lots of there's tons of little things that people no doubt pick up, like, the CEO of Armadine Corp, is called John Carlyle, and the sort
Carlyle Group, yeah.
Carlyle Group, of course, who are, massive financiers of the military-industrial complex.
Yep. It's an international organization, too.
An international organization, which is almost, they do a whole bunch of different things, in terms of investments and venture capital and stuff like that. But basically, they're most well known for being, involved in the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
So, that's interesting that he didn't. I don't think he chose that name arbitrarily.
No way.
Yeah.
I noticed that too, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah. Another thing, sort of with names, I noticed that one of the rifles that they use, it says Chem Rail on the side of it. It says Chem Rail. It's written right in text on the side of the rifle, Chem Rail. And obviously it made me think of chemtrail because it's just missing one of the letters in there. So I just wondered if they were trying to, get the viewer to think chemtrail when they see that. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's interesting though. I mean, purely due to what Neill Blomkamp has said, and due to the amount of symbolic, allegorical themes which relate to the times we are living in right now and will be living in the future. I think that was probably put in there on purpose, for whatever reason. And obviously, we can't prove, that was done, but to try and elicit the idea of a chemtrail in someone's mind. But I mean,
it seemed deliberate to me because it's just so similar. It's just one letter off. That's it.
Yeah, just missing a T. Yeah. And that's also, the whole idea of chemtrails, being used as a soft kill bioweapon as well, not just for climate engineering, but as to bring, to reduce population as well. I mean, that is the theories of why the geoengineering programs are in operation, and I tend to believe there might be a bit of truth to that as well. And so you've got the whole idea of the chemtrail being used to kill off some of the population, and then you've got the gun being used to kill off some of the population as well. Yeah. So both are methods of control, methods of depopulation in their own separate, unique ways. So perhaps there is something to that. Yeah,
there might be. Another thing I noticed was a theme of decapitation. I'd like to talk about this more in the esoteric side in the second hour next month too. But I'll just mention quick here that I noticed at least 3 points where there was decapitation, and it seemed to be a deliberate theme put in there.
Yeah, you're right. That did happen a number of times in the film, and I'm sure we can talk about the significance in that of that later on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What else did you notice? Is there anything else?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, there's so many little points, and the thing with a film like this is that there's been so much attention to detail in terms of allegory, symbolism, and all the rest of it that every time you watch it, you're going to pick up something new. It's like The Matrix, every time you watch it, you're going to notice another sort of allegory or another little tie into something or another little message that's been embedded somewhere. So there's so many of them, and there's probably some that I've noticed but have forgotten. But in terms of little notes, I think that just about covers it for now, and we can always bring up other stuff later on. But I think one of the main things I'll just come back to is just the idea of the predictive programming element in terms of the degradation of human life. The total dehumanization of human beings under a computerized. Well, they don't say it's an AI system, but it's fairly close. It's a computer that runs everything. Mm-hmm. That runs everything. Yeah. So and if human beings basically being treated like cattle, and of the director of the film saying this film is about right now. Yeah. So people can think about that. I think that would be a good note to finish on at least for this hour.
Definitely. Well, you've been listening to Themes and Memes, our new podcast. I hope that all of you will subscribe, and you can find these podcasts posted to our respective websites. My website would be theageoftransitions.com, Adam's website being cerebralrevolt.com. We'll be posting these podcasts to both our websites. Please listen. We'll have YouTube channels, be posting it there, and, spread the word and help us out. What do you say about that, Adam? How do you feel about the podcast?
Yeah. I'm happy with it. I think it's good, and I think that we're only just getting started here. I think there's a whole other world of ideas to explore.